I think overall in law enforcement, I have always told people it's a great job and you should look into it. I think with what's going on in the last couple years especially, it's probably the first time that I haven't really been pushing, because now you have politicians, right? I mean, You never had politicians against the police.
The voice you just heard is Brian Smith. Brian is our guest today on the Our 2 Cents podcast. I think many of our local listeners will be familiar with Brian, but for those of you who are not, I offer you a brief bio. Brian is originally from Philadelphia, PA. He served 4 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, holds a degree in criminal justice, and served 28 years in the CHP. That's the California Highway Patrol, for those of you who've never watched an episode of CHIPS. And if you don't know who Ponch and John are from CHIPS, you really need to go back and look it up. It's some really high-quality acting from the 1970s and 80s. Anyway, I digress. Brian has served in many consulting roles in law enforcement and even had a short stint as deputy chief of a small local community that you would all recognize. Brian is a multifaceted, high-energy individual, and we get into some of those facets on today's show. We talk about law enforcement and the current challenges we're facing. Of course, we get into all of that on the surface, but something you may not know is that Brian is an author. He's a hockey player, and he has not completely made it official yet, but he's strongly considering running for a very important local political office. Also, keep listening to the very end for some very sound advice from Brian. And now, stay tuned for the Our 2 Cents podcast.
Welcome back to the Our 2 Cents podcast, the show where your local professionals sit down with an array of guests to hear their story and impart some wisdom for both business and life-improving skills. This is your place to hear business and community leaders discuss relevant topics that matter to you.
And welcome to the show today. My name is Scott Hansen. I'm flying solo today, no pun intended, as your solo host on the Our 2 Cents podcast. Before we get to our show, pardon me while I shamelessly plug our show and remind you to connect with us on the socials, the Instagrams and the LinkedIns. That's very important to us. And get on there and even message us. Tell us what we're doing good. Tell us what you like about the show. If there's anything you don't like, keep it to yourself. Just kidding. But we do appreciate your support and your feedback. So reach out to us. Let us know. So, Brian Smith, welcome. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, you bet.
I've been excited to have you on. I've known you a long time. I was trying to think back on getting prepped for the show, how long we've known each other. It must be at least a dozen years or so. And I want to say that the first time we met was probably in the ice rink.
Yeah, we were on the same team
We
together.
were on the same hockey team. And I was trying to think if we had known each other before that, but I don't think so. But we were playing some hockey, adult league, beer league, as is known sometimes. But we had a lot of fun doing that. And then shortly thereafter, though, I kind of defected and started my own team where recently now we play against each other.
Well, I remember every time we played, I was always looking forward to talking to you, but I usually had to wait till you signed all the autographs after the game. So, now that we're playing against each other, right, the next game is... Are we playing this week? Or
I think it's coming up. It's either this week, next week. And you are pretty serious about hockey for it being a hobby of sorts. I mean, I know you really get into it. So you're from Philadelphia, PA.
Right.
So is that where the hockey genes come from?
Yeah, you know what? Back east, hockey's huge, which California now is getting a lot bigger, right? With Wayne Gretzky coming to L.A. and who would ever think that California would have three professional hockey teams?
It is wild.
Right? So
it is wild. And so much ice now. So hockey rinks have popped up all over in Southern California, Northern California.
And look at, Bakersfield, the products that they put out, these young kids that are now, how good they are, right? Look at your son, and my son's playing up at San Jose State right now.
Yeah, is he?
Team,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's, and I also, I was just a young kid when the Flyers won back-to-back Stanley Cup, so it just really...
I know you're a huge Flyers fan.
Die hard, and they're killing me right now.
So even being out here in California hasn't changed your mind at all? It's always still a Flyers fan.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was 10 years old, the Miami Dolphins were undefeated. And I told my dad one day, as a 10-year-old, I said, yeah, Dad, the Miami Dolphins are my favorite team. And he goes, no, they're not. And I said, what? And he goes, you're in Philly, boy. It's the Eagles, Flyers, Sixers, Phillies.
I'll tell you who your team is, right?
Well, it's just back there. When you're in Philly, you're a Philly fan. California is a melting pot, right? It's a mixture of people from all over the country. But in Philly, you're Philly. You don't even think about being. Even when we're in the basement, which is most of the time, you're still a Philly fan.
Yeah, I know it. And West Coast sports are not nearly as serious as they are in places like Philadelphia. But I think that's changing a little bit. I know Bakersfield as a community is a huge sports fan community, right?
Yeah,
You see that with the Condors. Condors is something else too. Now, an AHL team in town. It's wild.
You know what? And, you know, we used to have season seats to the Kings and drive down to L.A., but you know what? The Condors are AHL. There's no reason to drive over the Grapevine all the way to L.A. to watch a hockey game when you have such good talent here.
The value is so
good. It really is. And it's great hockey. You know, tape-to-tape passes. We enjoy it. We don't even really, maybe I catch one or two games down in L.A. now. I mean, all my games, you know, I play here, but
yeah. And for those listening who haven't been out to a Condors game, you got to get out there. It's a lot of fun to watch, even if you know nothing about hockey. You get hooked pretty quick.
And as you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, I watched hockey on TV, and I just couldn't follow it and all that." You go to a game, people are sold.
Oh, it's a different deal
after one game.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a fast game. So what originally brought you out to California?
So I came out with the Marine Corps. You know, I wanted to be a state trooper, Pennsylvania state trooper, since I was 5 years old. Yeah. Everything I did went that way. And I was accepted to college, and I got the loan. And they said, because my dad made too much money, that I wasn't going to get any grants. But they didn't look at the fact that there were 11 kids in my family. I was number 9 of 11. Wow. So. And my dad was saying, look, you don't want to be in debt your whole life. And then I was speaking to somebody, and they said that the military will pay for your bachelor's degree. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to the military, I'm going in the top branch, and that's the Marine Corps. So I went to Parris Island, and then my first station was 29 Palms.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I'll tell you, you talk about not a attractive place.
Is that right?
Yeah. Then I went back to Georgia, and then I got Camp Pendleton, which was beautiful. So I figured, you know, I didn't want to do the winters anymore, but I rode with the police department down there and had a great time. I rode with the sheriff's department. I had a great time. I rode with the highway patrol, and I said, this is what I'm doing the rest of my life.
Did you ride with them and get into that voluntarily, or was that something that the Marine Corps was promoting for you?
No, I just went to the office to see. Plus, I got my bachelor's degree down there, and some of the instructors were sheriff and stuff, so they set it up for me.
Bachelor's in criminal justice. Yeah,
right,
okay.
Right. But when I rode with the highway patrol, you know, a lot of people think the highway patrol is just freeways and citations, but you know what? We felony counts. I mean, we work county roads. We worked, and now you have these smash and grabs where you see in San Francisco and San Diego and L.A. The highway patrol is actually in charge of that task force now for the state to combat that. You know, they're working on that. They're also the vehicle theft coordinator for the state, drug recognition for the state, which my son works in that unit in Sacramento.
Okay.
And so we do it all now. Mm-hmm. And so in my career, I just loved every day. Now, there's been tragedies and horrible things to see and all that, and been in a few shootings myself, but I still love the job.
Yeah, and so I read about some of those in your column that you do for the Bakersfield, California. I don't know if everybody knows that you author that, but the cocktails. Right. I like reading those. Just some wild things that you guys run up against, and it's not always your stuff directly, right? You're also bringing in stories from people you know in law enforcement.
If I look at it, probably, believe it or not, probably 125, 130 stories were actually mine.
Is that right?
And I'm up to about 445 stories that I've published so far, and the rest are from, you know, other officers and deputies. And you can't make these stories up. I think that's the best part.
Well, that's the thing, is when you read them, you realize, this had to have happened because you would have never thought this up. You would have never predicted this.
You couldn't, some of them. And then I also get some that I can't print, right? Sure. Some of them are funny ones, but then other ones are kind of like too tragic to really put like I've gotten a lot of different suicide ones, and we usually, you know, don't really put them out unless it's kind of on a side way. And California doesn't like to put anything about suicides either. So
sure.
Yeah.
So 28 years at the CHP.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Long time. What changes did you see? I mean, that's nearly 3 decades. And then even after that, you were chief of police, I believe.
No, I was deputy chief of police.
Deputy chief of a city.
Right.
So really 3 decades in law enforcement. Tell us a little bit about some of the changes that you've seen go on over that 30 years.
I think what you're seeing, I think a lot of agencies, you know, have worried about public relations. But I would say from day one of the academy, even back when I went through, that public relations was just stressed with the highway patrol over and over and over. How you treat people, the professionalism, always be there for them. And even at the end of the shift, you want to get home, but somebody needs help. You don't drive by them, you stop and stuff. So this big push on how you treat the public and all that, we're a lot more push now where you're seeing maybe on the East Coast, Midwest, because I think California kind of had it, but the Highway Patrol has always had it. So that changed. The other changes that came, and this is, my son and son-in-law are on the Highway Patrol, and my son-in-law has only been on 2 years. He's in East LA, and he'll get discouraged about different changes. And I tell him, you know what? They're going to keep coming.
Get used to it, right?
You just got to roll with them. I think one of the big ones was, we didn't wear seatbelts. And then when the big seatbelt push came, they exempted police because of having to get in and out of the vehicle. And then, officers and deputies were getting killed without wearing seatbelt. So then the Highway Patrol said, well, it's mandatory that you wear the lap belt. They used to install a separate lap belt. And then they came out and said, no, you have to wear the full shoulder harness. And I remember complaining, saying, you know what, they're going to get us sitting in a car and they're going to kill us. And you know what, now, if you don't, even in a patrol car, you don't have the lap belt, you don't have it on, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Everything that I think we complained about. I think overall in law enforcement, I have always told people it's a great job and you should look into it. I think with what's going on in the last couple years especially, it's probably the first time that I haven't really been pushing because now you see with the public, now you have politicians, right? I mean, you never had politicians against the police. In the
weighing in, yeah.
And on the last presidential election, they actually were, certain party that was up there mentioning that, hey, we're going to take care of the, defunding the police and all this. Yeah. And wait, these are people running for president that are talking about defunding the police? You know what? When you, like these shootings, unfortunately, I was involved in 2 fatal shootings myself. And when I see people saying that, hey, that officer wanted to kill that person or they did it because of this or that, it's like people have no idea. Yeah. No idea. It's the last thing you want to do is to use your weapon. And then when you do it, you see you were right. You didn't want to use it. Yeah. Even though you had in my case, both of them self-defense, right? Mm-hmm. But I think also when you see mob rule and now where you can go to jail, because look at Atlanta. I mean, if you see that video where those officers bent over backwards to try and, subdue that guy, and then he got the taser, and then the officer shot and killed him, where a week or so before that, a person with they're trying to say that the taser was deadly force, but now that it's being used against a police officer, they're saying it's not deadly force, right?
Yeah.
And so he gets arrested and charges filed, and, I guess he was eventually cleared, but to think that you're out there trying to help people, right? And that's why you're joining. You're really there to be there for people, and then to think that maybe because the public, they don't want riots, and so your city councilmen or your mayors or police chiefs and stuff, they figure, hey, let's have a police officer as a fall guy. Here you're there to do good things, and you could end up in prison or sued, and then even if you get cleared, you file bankruptcy because you had to hire an attorney. I mean,
well,
I
and
don't
law
know.
enforcement is such a different line of work than so many other things. The things that are asked of the person who goes into law enforcement is so much more than a person who's asked to work overtime, for an example, or to lift heavy objects. It goes beyond that. It's actually put your life on the, like we're going to ask you to put your life on the line sometimes, at any time, and you may not know when that time is. So I kind of miss the days, and I don't know if I'm just biased, kind of coming up in the generation that I did, but where did we turn a corner and change from having a lot of respect and honor for our law enforcement and having them carry the authority of, the uniform and the badge, and I just it's disheartening to see that we don't live in a world where that is celebrated.
I'm going to tell you exactly, in my opinion anyway, that I've always said is when I grew up, we had Adam 12, the Rookies, Chips.
Yep, I watched them.
And every single one of those shows, the cops were respected. They were good people.
They were the good guys.
They were the good guys.
Yeah.
If you now, and anybody can do this test on your own, every single movie, every single TV show, the cop is the bad guy. They're corrupt. And if you have a show where there's a good officer, I guarantee you in that series, they're going to be arresting a cop somewhere, or they're going to show the bad side of police. They will not show police as the hero, as the good person. And people, even listening now can say, well, if they weren't beating people up. If you take the millions of contacts. You look at all the police officers across the United States, and you take every single day of every single contact of how many contacts they have and how many people are fighting them, and then you come up with a few bad incidents. Wow, we're doing really well across this country when you're entrusting 21-year-olds and over and these people to be out there. Now, there's a lot of training that they get, but when you have that many incidents and you can only pick up a few bad incidents, I'd say that's really spectacular, and officers are doing a good job. But the media, and even now your academia, with your colleges and professors that are putting down law enforcement and media, that's very powerful. You're reaching all these people, and these people are believing that how bad police are.
Well, and that's why I think your opinion on this is really valuable and important, Brian, because right now you don't have a horse in this race. It's not as though you're still working in this industry actively right now, but you do have 30 years of experience and insight about it. And I think that that's the question for you, is the image that we're portraying on our law enforcement now, is it deserved? And I'm hearing you say, no, it's really not, but that it is, like I say, disheartening to have that go on when here you have the experience to let people know, that's really not deserved, is what I'm hearing from you.
Well, and again, and this isn't just, of course, people would say, well, he's been in law enforcement, he's going to defend law enforcement. Sure. But I'll tell you that I would say probably 99% of the officers you talk to, if there's a bad cop, we're the first ones that want them out. And I've always said, you know what, if I have an officer that does something with a good heart, but they screw up or they make a mistake, hey, I'm going to be looking out for them. They're still going to be disciplined. They still may get some kind of discipline. But if they did it with a good heart and they made a mistake, you take that into consideration. But if you do something with a black heart and you don't care about embarrassing law enforcement or the highway patrol, say you do drugs or you steal something, I'm the worst guy to have against you because you're going to be gone. I don't want you on the highway patrol. I don't want you in the sheriff's department. I don't want you in law enforcement at all. We do want to get rid of the bad apples. So
do the various law enforcement organizations now have it in their power where if leadership is seeing a bad apple or seeing something that they want to make a change, do they have the freedom to do that, or do they have a lot of red tape and bureaucracy to get through to be able to make those executive decisions to right the ship and go in the right direction?
Well, with the highway patrol, each commander decides whether they're going to bring adverse action against an employee. And then you have your steps that it gets reviewed and it goes up to headquarters. And then the employee, if they get fired, they can go through the state personnel board and stuff. So there are some holes where maybe people can fall through, but that's getting tougher and tougher. Yeah. And like I said, you may have a union represent somebody, but even your unions, if it's something like that where it's really a stain against the department, even your unions don't want those.
Yeah, have you seen things change with the unions with regard to their objectivity about?
I think that it would almost be like when people say lawyers, how can you represent, a guilty person? Well, even if an attorney, now look, you're going to have attorneys that are going to do whatever they can to make their person win, but I think most times the way attorneys look at their job is, hey, I'm just making sure the person is represented fairly and by the Constitution. And yeah. I kind of see that with the unions where, hey, they're going to represent their people, make sure that, hey, if they're getting an adverse action and they deserve it, at least make sure that it's done properly and you follow the regulations and the rules and stuff like that. But I think basically with law enforcement, the bottom line is we don't want, the bad apples out there because it makes us all look bad. Because you know what? If a highway patrolman does something wrong, most people are rude to somebody. Most people won't distinguish that it was highway patrol, right? That affects sheriffs and police and all that. Same thing if police 100%. Or sheriffs do something. It's a stain against all law enforcement.
100%. And too, with the public in general, a lot has to do with how the story will be told. So a lot of times there's a difference between even the right and wrong of the situation and then just the optics of it, and how it plays out. And so I think that's a big challenge that, law enforcement has now more than ever, is just that PR aspect of how is this not spinning it, not changing the facts, but just making sure that the facts are clear and are really out there for people to decide on their own.
And it's hard when you have the national media that's putting out the wrong information. The Michael Brown, everything was hands up and all that. He never had his hands up, and they had everything to prove that. But even coming out and showing the proof, and even autopsy reports and all that, people don't care. They want to push the agenda, and it's really hard to beat that.
Yeah. So how does it get beat? Because as a culture, as a society, I think if we could everybody put down their weapons a little bit on both sides, for those that want to say that there's just two sides, I think there's really just many sides of these arguments. But what is the solution? What does bring these sides back together and apply a little bit of reason and a little bit of care with the facts and understanding and a little bit of pause to understand things before you're quick to react and things like that. What solves that? How do we get in that direction of solving it?
I think that social media has a lot of good things about it, but unfortunately, there's a lot of negative as well where people jump on that. And I mean, look at it now. People attack one another. We used to have our own opinions, right? You could talk about it. And look, if you believed one way and, I believe the other way, we would at least talk it out, listen. And at the end, if we didn't agree, we just didn't agree. Now people are attacking one another for that thing. But I'll tell you, that's exactly why I started Cop Tales, is I just got tired of seeing all the negativity on TV and in the news and everything, and it was always against cops. And I thought, wait, I just gave 34 years of my life. When people say, hey, you're retired now, which I really haven't been, I've been still so busy with helping out other agencies and different stuff. But, when they ask me, what do you miss the most about it? Well, I miss there's a lot of excitement out there. There's a lot of good people out there. But believe it or not, I mean, it might even sound corny, but what I miss are when people are in trouble, right? Or even something as minor as broke down, right? They're not from Bakersfield or wherever I was working at the time. And maybe they're traveling from Alabama up to Washington State, and they broke down and they have their family and they don't have any answers. They don't know what to do. And you pull up and you're there to help them. I mean, that's the thing. To those people, you just became their hero, right? I will tell you right now, if you ask any officer out there, they're going to tell you they probably spend a lot of money every year buying gas for people, buying replacement tires, taking them to a motel. We spend a lot of money. People don't know about that. But that was the part, even changing the tire, right? You pull up to an elderly couple, and I still do that on my own now, right? Not working. I still stop if I see that and change tires and help people. But that's probably the part that I miss the most.
Yeah.
And so when people attack with no knowledge behind it, or they're just jumping on that bandwagon, it's very upsetting when you know that you just gave your whole life for this and would do anything for anybody to help them, and then people are attacking for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. It's a shame. Something that is also connected to this that we keep seeing anecdotally out with our own experiences, but also there's headlines about it, and it's a big hot topic, is just I hate to even call it homelessness, because I want to say it's almost kind of a vagrant problem, of people being out on the streets doing damage. It's not so much that they're just out on the streets, that they're doing regular damage, vandalism, theft, and the old concept that these things are wrong has kind of gone out the window. What is going on with that, and what do we do about that? They passed in California Prop 47, and that pretty much decriminalized so many things that now, you can have all these drugs on you and nothing happens to you. You get a citation. You're under the influence of drugs. You're in possession of drugs, all that. Before, a lot of these people that are homeless, a lot of times they were on drugs, they would get arrested, right? And so they detox. Maybe they come out and they straighten their life. Maybe they go 3-6 months, a year, whatever, and then maybe get back on drugs. But at least they have those periods to get detoxed. It's a wake-up call to get arrested, right? I mean,
but because you're in custody, right? You don't, you go through these programs, and you're not, at the very least, right? You're not getting the drugs. Now, nothing happens. You get a citation, you get stopped again, another citation, right? Nothing happens. So they're not having a chance to sober up. So a lot of these people are now, it's frying their brain, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are people out there because of mental issues too, right? And we have to have compassion for those people as well. We can't just lump everybody into that same group that, hey, just criminals and all that. So they need help as well. I think the problem is, I don't have all the answers, but I think the problem is it's just too easy to just keep dumping money and saying we're doing something about the homeless. And do you know that the Prop 47 was actually named Safe Schools Initiative, right? And it was decriminalizing this. And now they want to even make it so that all drugs, like Oregon, right, where all drugs are legal, and they don't realize what we're doing to people. I know people listening probably saying, hey, we need to legalize all drugs. No, there are people that are frying themselves. There's more accidents now because of it. It's not a good thing. And until we start repealing that and making it a crime again, and, it will actually arresting people for drugs are going to be helping them, right? And then we can start doing more about homelessness. And people want to have compassion, but you're a business owner and you care about people. You don't want to just say, hey, we don't care about them, but you still got to run your business. And when people are destroying your properties and sleeping on the sidewalk and you can't even open your business, we need to protect business owners as well, right?
Yeah, I think it's a real problem. So you and I have discussed a little bit offline that you do have some political aspirations here coming up, possibly, and which is exciting. I think that's a fantastic idea. So I think that would give you an opportunity to take some of these ideas and actually turn them into actions, right? So tell me a little bit about that.
For a few terms now, I've been waiting. It was brought to my attention, hey, you should run for sheriff and stuff, and looked into it. And at the time I said, listen, if the deputies and rank and file and, the commanders, the sheriff personnel wanted me to do it, I would do it. If they didn't want me there, then I don't want to do it. I would do it if they wanted me there. And Donnie Youngblood I was waiting, to see if when he got done running, but each 4 years, Donnie said he was going to run again. And there's no way you're going to beat Donnie in this county, right?
No, that's right.
I mean, people love Donnie in this county. So when he announced that he was going to run for his 5th term, so I figured, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to, wait around any longer. But then somebody suggested that Mike Maggard may retire. Mm-hmm. And just to be clear on your show, he has not announced. And so he may not. I mean, he may still run, but somebody said, hey, you should run. And it was suggested to me a few years ago to run for the assembly, but I didn't really look into politics. I really wasn't interested. Other offices. But then when they suggested county supervisor, I thought, you know what? I think I can do more as a county supervisor. And one of the things, one of the main things was, try and get it so that we're not losing our first responders here. I mean, the sheriff's department and, different fire and different agencies here in the county. And I thought I could do more. Well, then as I start looking into more of it, I thought, I could probably have more effect if I can get in a position where maybe talk to other county governments to try and do something about Prop 47, maybe as a group, if we could, get together. And then I like you and I talked about earlier about the homelessness, actually try and get in there and get some task forces and talk to other places and see what they're doing other than, repealing Prop 47. Our parks, there are a lot of people that are afraid to go to the parks now, because they have to worry about homelessness. You have to worry about needles and it being unsafe. And so we need to make, our parks safer so that people can start using them again. And I'm also a big, kind of giving you the whole spiel here now.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And you're absolutely right about the parks and the common spaces and outdoor areas that are set aside for communities to be able to use as a family or as, even if it's not specifically for kids, just for the public to be able to use. And that has really changed.
It's getting everywhere now.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be, okay, certain parts of town. And I think people would just accept that, which we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be accepting it anywhere. But now it's getting into, the other parts of the communities as well.
Yeah.
And then along that, I'm also very, supportive of oil and agriculture and, healthcare. But I think the biggest thing, and also, when I was in high school, we had in our yearbook, people had to put sayings in, and people were putting stuff like love, love your neighbor, all this stuff. And I remember mine was, when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns, right? So I've always been a big gun guy. So, and that's something. And so the other thing is reducing waste and, hold the department heads responsible. And I say department heads as a general term. I'm not implying that they're not now. I'm just saying that's part of it. But as a commander with the Highway Patrol and an assistant chief, I always tried to run my offices like I ran my house, like it's my family. And so I wanted to make sure that I got the cheapest bid, right? Still quality, but got the cheapest bid, and made sure that I actually researched it and make sure you get along with your neighbors, right? And make sure that, you don't tear your equipment up. Take care of your equipment and stuff. And so that's what I always did with the Highway Patrol. And also I'm a worker. I'm always trying to get new things done, and I'm not afraid to work. And then I think another issue that I always felt strongly about was, with this COVID and everything that goes on, everybody has different opinions. And, I'm not trying to get into a discussion that we should not be closing down private businesses. Did you ever think in your lifetime that the government could tell us that we can't go to church and we wouldn't go to church? To me, over this whole COVID, That's probably the biggest thing that just shook me, is to think, wow, where are we in the United States when the government can say you're not going to church, and we shut the churches down? And we had people that have been in business for generations and generations, and they shut their business down while keeping big corporation and your Walmarts. And I know I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of people, but people lost family businesses that they've had for generations.
And they're not opening back up?
And they're not opening back up in some, and that should have never happened, right?
Yeah.
And people have to look to us. I say us, if I'm in that position, that they're kind of the things that I'm going to be fighting for, and trying to defend, right?
Yeah, well, and let's talk about your experience a little bit, because, you ran major departments of the Highway Patrol. And so in those situations, you're gaining a lot of experience, both in the number of people under your employ and budgets and things like that. So I imagine a lot of that experience would cross over pretty well.
It does. And I think, like I said, with family, like budget, right? So we would get so much, and we'd have to look at our budget and where we're spending. And it used to be that you couldn't save for a rainy day in California, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you didn't use it, you lost it. Yep. Well, I still would send money back. And I was told, hey, if you don't spend it, maybe next year you're not going to get that much. I still would not spend it because it was waste. I'd rather send it back and let somebody who needed it use it. And I think the same thing when you're talking county government or whatever agency you're talking about. We have to use the money. It's not our money, right? It's all of our money. I mean, it's taxpayers' money, that hard-earned money. That's, people shouldn't be looking at it like, okay, here, get what you want, and we have the money, so go ahead and spend it. We should really be watching what we spend and not work deals. Okay, you can spend this money if you let me spend this money. You know what I mean? And I think most people feel that way. Now, I also know that there's a lot of bureaucracy, and there are a lot of good people that went into politics and had ideas of what they wanted to do, and maybe it didn't work out that way. I think the idea is you have to do everything in your power so that at least that you did the right thing, right? And I used to tell officers all the time on Highway Patrol that, and I told other agencies as well when I talk one-on-one is, you know what, you have to be proud of what you did during your term. And we all refer to our ID number, right? That's on our badge. Yeah. And I would tell people when they get discouraged and say, hey, then you know what, if they're going to act that way, then I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to enforce that. And I said, hey, it doesn't matter about other people. You have to be proud of what you did. And you're wearing that badge with your ID number. When you retire, you want to know that you made that, that ID number proud.
Yeah. I imagine, so you were always answering directly to Sacramento, or your headquarters was in Sacramento?
Well,
right?
Yeah, that's the main headquarters, but each office answers to the division office.
Okay.
Right? So when I was in Bakersfield as a commander, I answered to my assistant chief in Fresno.
Okay.
And there was like 18 offices in Fresno. Then when I became assistant chief, then the different commanders would answer to me that I had under me.
It just occurred to me that I imagine people up and down the state who are both in law enforcement, but probably politically involved as well, I'd imagine.
Right.
Back to your discussion or your thought on doing something about Prop 47.
Yeah, no, that's real important.
I didn't realize that you had written a book. We Were 17 Again is the name of the book, right?
We Were 17 Again.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you that if we just went hunting with a friend of the family. Actually, they're kind of related. My son-in-law's father.
Okay.
He said, I didn't bring anything to read. I go, well, if you want to read this, and I toss it to him, and he goes, man, it's a fast read. I mean, he said he really enjoyed it. What I find is if you enjoyed your teenage years, then you would really enjoy this book. If you didn't have fun in your teenage years, then you probably wouldn't. But I've had a lot of people read it and say, you know what? It was like I was reading about myself in high school and the things we used to do. And I think it's really enjoyable.
Well, one of the reasons I bring that up, Brian, is as long as I've known you, you've had a ton of energy. You're always doing something. And so, I mentioned the hockey and the book and things like that just because when I see you around, it's really almost never in a law enforcement capacity. Yeah. I just see you around doing a lot of things around town. You're involved in a lot of things. You're very active. Your energy level is always just up, and you're always into new stuff. So I think that's
And I think one of the things about running this campaign too is I know a lot of people say, when somebody runs for office, they end up going to all these events, and then after they win, they don't really go to a lot of the events. I always went when I was with the Highway Patrol and as commander, and I went to so many different things. But you know what I think it is I just, like this campaign, I hate asking for donations and I hate asking for endorsements, but I love meeting people. I just really, when I was a kid, my mom used to talk to strangers in the grocery store and we'd get embarrassed, like, Mom, you don't even know them. And now my kids get embarrassed because I'm always talking to strangers. But honestly, that's been the best part of this campaigning. And I still have a long way to go. I mean, it's not till June, but that's absolutely the best part, is meeting people.
So when it comes to advice or things that you've gotten, I don't know, maybe it was from childhood or parents or somebody, or just along the way, is there any piece of advice that stands out to you that you've received or heard or read, I don't know, that I'd say maybe you live by, or maybe you just remember and go back to on a regular occasion to, I don't know if it's keep that energy level up or take on the next thing that you're working on? There's
a couple things. And one is, my dad was pretty strict, and I mean, great father and loving, but I remember like in the Highway Patrol, right? So I was pretty young when I made the sergeant's list, and you're probably, I don't know what it is at the time, 600-700 people in the state that took the test, maybe more. And I came out number 3 in the entire state on that promotional list, and I called my dad, and I was so excited, and I go, Dad, I came out number 3 in the state, and I really didn't even have any seniority points. And he goes, 3? What happened to 1 and 2? Right? And I was talking to my brother about that. Like I said, I'm number 9 of 11. And my brother brought up a fact. He goes, hey, Dad was tough, but every one of us did a good job in life, right? We were kind of successful in life. But my dad always said, hey, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And I'll tell you, to this day, like anytime somebody would call and say, hey, do you know how to do this? Or, hey, where can I get a hold of this? A lot of times, I mean, I'll never tell somebody no. I'll, instead of saying, hey, I don't know, you find out. I always try and find out the answer first, or at least find out the right person for them to go to. And then on my mom's side, it was always compassion and defend the underdog. When somebody's being made fun of, just like with this bullying, like all the school talks I get that I went to, I always made sure that I covered bullying, because especially when these kids are young, they don't realize, the damage that they're causing, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe doing things to be cool. And we can all probably look back and have regrets of times we should have acted. I think the biggest thing that my mom taught me was make sure you're there for other people. And if somebody can't take care of themselves, then you take care of them. And so they're probably the 2 biggest advice I tell you. And for people just starting out as business, right? You're just talking to your son of what a go-getter he is, right?
Yeah.
And not happy with just what he's always going for more.
He is, yeah.
I would say to people that when you get discouraged at work, and maybe you're working someplace and maybe they don't appreciate the work that you're doing or other people are doing, a lot of people go, hey, why should I bother then? Well, again, we go back to the same thing where, you know what, you got to do what's going to make you proud, right? And so even if it seems like people don't appreciate it, do it anyway. Do it for yourself, because it'll come back to you. It'll come back to you later.
I know it, and I think that's important, because ultimately that's the person who you really want to make happy is yourself. You think maybe you want to make that parent or that job or that employer happy, but honestly, that isn't what matters. What matters is ultimately, I look myself in the mirror, I know I did a good job, or I'm proud of what I did. And I think that's overlooked, Brian. I think that's great advice. If you're writing books, I imagine you read a little bit, or you have some good go-to material that you go to for, I don't know, inspiration or information. Is there anything that you recommend that's a regular thing that you look at or read that you'd recommend to the audience to pick up and check out?
Yeah, the Wayne Gretzky autobiography.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Tell me more.
It is a good book, but you know what? And you said about advice to people. One advice that I'll give people is read a lot. And I have to admit, I hate to say it, I did not read a lot.
Yeah.
And yet, when I meet people that are just super smart and intelligent, I always find out that because they read a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the other piece of advice that I would tell somebody is, you know what, read as much as you can, right? Now, there are things for entertainment purposes, but also just to learn things.
Yeah.
Now, I've always loved American history, so I've bought books just on American history. They were actually school books, right, that I read just to refresh myself, because I enjoy that. But yeah, I think reading is is a huge deal. And so in answer to your question, I'd like to have a better answer for you, but
but your history comment is relevant because there's this saying that if you don't know your history, or it's bound to repeat and things like that. I think that's so true. I think that so many things we're even going through right now, like we've had a lot of discussion about it, like the lack of civility and just the unrest and things like that. A lot of that stuff has happened over and over and over in our history. And when you start to put some perspective on it and realize that this is kind of just another chapter in, the human condition, you start to realize that, okay, we can take a deep breath. This isn't the end of the world. We will also get through this.
But I think, what, we can have our difference of opinions, and maybe you read one blog and I read something else. And so we believe part of what we read. But you know what? How about people should actually talk to people that came here from Cuba?
Yeah.
Right? Where they lost different freedoms. Yeah. Talk to them. Don't talk to me that I have an opinion or you have an opinion. Talk to somebody who saw what happened when they lost their freedoms. People don't think what's happening now is a big deal, but go to a country because I'll tell you, once you lose it, you're not getting it back.
Yeah.
We're slowly losing different rights, and once you lose them, they're not coming back. And that's, I think, what really worries me is people don't see it. And then if you lose it slowly, you don't realize you're losing it, right? So the different generations, they don't think there's any problems with different rights that they're giving up. And the answer is, well, look, if it's going to cause this, then I'm willing to give that up, right?
Yeah.
And yet, look at the history of from the Revolutionary War forward, people that have fought and died for our freedoms, and we're willing to give it up that easily.
I think you got to be careful when you find yourself saying that or thinking that, right? You got to give that a second thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian, it's been a great discussion. How would somebody who wants to reach out to you afterwards find out more about you? Where would they go to find that out for you?
So we haven't put a website for the running for supervisor yet, but that's coming out. But right now, anybody can email me. So my name is Brian Matthew Smith. So the way to remember it is bmsmith778@gmail.com. Anybody can email me. You can also, on Mondays in California, for now, I'm doing cocktails. Once I announce, I won't be able to be doing cocktails anymore, but my email is on there. And anybody that's interested in reading cocktails, if they go to Californian Cocktails, COPTALES. You just go to Californian Cocktails online. You can read all past stories, and I guarantee you, once you start reading them, you're really going to enjoy them because they're the true stories that officers experience.
I highly recommend it. They're all pretty short. You go in there, they're a short read, but I think you kind of get hooked because you can go in and read some of the archives of the articles you've written, right? Yeah, right. And you can't stop. It's good stuff. Brian Smith, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you, sir.
This show has been brought to you by the Law Office of Kyle Jones, Troy Burden with the Lynn Company, CPA John Duffield, Scott Hansen, real estate lender, broker, and investor, and Eckroth, LLC, a sales and marketing agency. You've been listening to the Our 2 Cents podcast. Check out the show notes for links and more information about the show. Also visit our website at our2centspodcast.com or check us on Instagram at Our 2 Cents Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe.